She bore 14 children with her own brother, the purest woman from the Kentucky forests. What would you do if you discovered that your family concealed secrets so profound they could shake the very foundations of society? The Appalachian Mountains hold stories that seldom reach our ears, lost between isolated valleys and communities living on the fringes of time. Today, I will reveal to you a case that remained buried in shadow for nearly 2 centuries. Martha Sullivan was not merely a country woman. She carried in her womb the burden of a family tradition that defied the laws of both nature and society. What you are about to discover in the next few minutes may forever alter your perception of the limits of family loyalty and the price paid by those born from pure blood. If you enjoy historical investigations that uncover humanity's darkest truths, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now. Prepare yourself for a story rarely told outside close academic circles. A narrative that shows how isolation and twisted beliefs can create generations marked by a devastating genetic legacy. Deep within the valleys and green hills of Kentucky, where sunlight rarely pierces the dense tree cover, only stacked stones and rotting boards remain. These are the silent traces of the Sullivan property, established in 1798, a place the local inhabitants avoid to this very day. The wind whispering through the ancient oaks seems to carry echoes, as if the earth itself still remembers the children born there with deformed faces and incomplete minds. When we look upon these ruins, we must understand that we are not just seeing the remains of a house. We are witnessing the physical testament to a terrible philosophy, the belief that the purity of the family blood must be preserved at any cost. The farmland, far from the thunderstorms that often punish these mountains, witnessed the muffled cries of babies born with extra fingers and malformed hearts, while the family patriarch, Ebenezer Sullivan, proudly proclaimed, "Our blood will remain as pure as gold, without the taint of outsiders." Dark clouds gather once more over the ruins, an omen of what is to come in this story. If you want to follow more cases like this, ones that shake society and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single investigation. The Sullivan property stretched across roughly 320 acres of rugged land in Kentucky's Harlan County mountains. A 2-story, 8-room wooden house stood at its center, surrounded by barns, stables, and smaller huts for hired hands. The family maintained a rigid internal hierarchy. Ebenezer at the summit, followed by his sons, then the Sullivan-born women, and finally the temporary workers who never stayed more than a single season. Each day began at 4 a.m. with the clang of an iron bell echoing through the valley, summoning everyone to their duties. The women spent 16 hours a day preparing food, weaving clothes, and caring for the young, while the men worked at hunting, farming, and occasional trade with distant villages. Control was exercised through constant surveillance. Strategically placed windows allowed Ebenezer to observe every movement on the property. The family chapel, built from dark oak, hosted not only prayers but also meetings where weddings between cousins and close relatives were decided. The creak of the floorboards announced the patriarch's arrival, demanding absolute silence. When snow enveloped the mountains and completely cut off the property for months, births took place in the basement of the main house, hidden from outside eyes. It was during a particularly harsh winter in 1823 that Martha Sullivan entered the world, her penetrating blue eyes seeming to hold a knowledge far beyond her years. That child, unknowingly, carried the future of the family lineage within her womb. Martha Sullivan grew up displaying extraordinary abilities that set her apart. By age 9, she knew the medicinal properties of 73 different plants growing in the surrounding forests. Her capacity for memorizing biblical texts impressed even the itinerant pastor who visited the region yearly. While other girls in the family were confined to the property's limits, Martha received special permission from her father to accompany the men on their occasional trading trips to the village of Cumberland, 12 miles away. On these rare ventures into the outside world, she carefully observed social interactions, absorbing information about medicine, law, and world news, while never revealing a detail about her own family. Within the Sullivan community, Martha held a privileged position. She was the only woman permitted to attend family meetings where important matters were discussed. The surrounding inhabitants sought out her healing skills, allowing her to cross the invisible border between Sullivan isolation and the rest of society. "The girl has the gift of healing hands and a language that does not speak," the locals said, trusting her while remaining fearful of the rest of the family. On nights with a full moon, Martha could be seen gathering specific herbs that only bloom in that light, moving like a shadow among the trees, carrying knowledge passed down through generations of Sullivan women. The paradox lay precisely in this. The more valuable she became to the external community, the more indispensable she became for the family's internal plans, especially to her brother Jeremiah, just 2 years older, who watched her with growing interest as they both matured. Leave in the comments, never give up the truth if you believe justice must reach all the oppressed. The horrors on the Sullivan property manifested gradually, like shadows lengthening at dusk. First came the whispers about the birth of cousin Robert in 1825 with 6 fingers on each hand, unable to make any sound but primitive grunts, kept in the attic and fed through a hatch. Then came cousin Elizabeth, born in 1827 from a marriage between uncle and niece, her skin covered in bluish spots and eyes so wide-set it seemed impossible to focus them both on the same object. In 1829, Frederick, the son of first-degree cousins, was born. By age 3 he still could not hold up his own head, dying in a violent seizure before he turned 5. With each problematic birth, Martha watched the adults' reactions, denial, rationalization, and finally, supernatural or religious explanations that never questioned the practice of consanguineous marriages. When the daughter of cousins Henry and Victoria was born without eyes in 1831, Martha witnessed Patriarch Ebenezer declare, "It is a divine test, not a sign to change our ways." Martha's inner transformation began quietly then, like water slowly eroding stone. Her face remained impassive as she assisted the midwife, but something fundamental had shifted within her. In her diary, found decades later, she wrote with trembling script, "I saw the eyeless face of an innocent today, and realized it was not God who created this incomplete creature, but the choices of men who consider themselves above the laws of nature." Martha's world finally collapsed on April 16, 1834, when her youngest sister, 9-year-old Sarah, was declared ready for a family pact. Sarah, a girl with a crystalline laugh and golden hair, was the only person Martha openly showed affection for. The two shared a small room under the main house's roof, where Martha secretly taught her sister to read and write, defying family rules that deemed female education unnecessary beyond basic domestic knowledge. That spring morning, Sarah was taken to the family chapel, where the patriarch announced her future marriage to her 42-year-old cousin, Herbert Sullivan, a man known for his cruelty to animals and violent temper. When Martha protested during the ceremony, she was forced to watch her sister punished, her hair forcibly cut off, followed by 3 days of confinement in the granary without proper water. On the 3rd day, when Martha was finally allowed to bring water to Sarah, she found her sister burning with fever, delirious, raving about black angels with iron claws. Martha spent 72 uninterrupted hours applying cold compresses and preparing medicinal infusions, holding the small, warm hand in her own. At dawn on the 4th day, she felt Sarah's fingers go slack. Shedding no tears and showing no outward mourning, Martha washed her sister's body with wild rose water, wrapped her in the white linen intended for her own wedding dress, and placed a small cloth doll, Sarah's last secret gift, beside her before burial. That night, alone under a blanket of stars, Martha took a silent oath before the simple grave. For every tear not shed, for every scream stifled, there will be a reckoning. The system upholding the Sullivan property was one of mutually reinforced authority. At its center, 63-year-old Ebenezer Sullivan ruled with an iron fist and religious rhetoric, citing distorted biblical passages to justify isolation and internal marriages. His firstborn, Jeremiah, 25, administered physical punishment, having developed particular methods that left no visible marks, using wet towels to beat transgressors. Uncle Thaddeus, Ebenezer's younger brother, supervised finances, making semi-annual trips to sell the property's goods and buy supplies, occasionally bringing desperate women from distant villages to partially renew the family blood. Reverend Blackwood, not a relative but complicit for convenience, visited the property quarterly to officiate unions and baptisms, receiving generous compensation for his silence. The growing tension reached its irreversible point during the celebration of Ebenezer's 65th birthday in October 1836. Before the entire gathered family, the patriarch announced, "To ensure the continuity of our purest lineage, I declare that Martha and Jeremiah will unite their lives and blood at the next full moon." Martha, then 19, watched her brother's face break into a smile as her relatives applauded the decision. That same night, she listened from behind the door to the detailed plan Ebenezer revealed to Jeremiah. "You will produce the next generation of Sullivan leaders. Your children, born of our lineage's purest blood, will be raised under my direct supervision to continue our tradition when I am gone." Martha understood then that she had reached the point of no return. It was not just her future at stake, but generations yet unborn. On November 7, 1836, Martha was subjected to the purification ritual that preceded all Sullivan marriages. Naked and bathed in herbs by 3 elder women of the family, she remained silent as they sang ancient songs from the British Isles. Her long brown hair was braided with white ribbons symbolizing purity, while Aunt Agnes whispered instructions on her marital duties, the details making her stomach churn. Dressed in a white nightgown made for the occasion, she was led into the center of the family circle where Ebenezer and Jeremiah waited. The patriarch held her right hand and his son's left, lifting them high as he proclaimed, "This blood belongs only to the Sullivans, will remain among the Sullivans, and will generate new Sullivans." The ceremony was interrupted when Martha suddenly fainted, collapsing hard against the wooden floor. The family doctor, Thompson, an alcoholic whose medical license had been revoked years prior, diagnosed it as mere female nervousness and prescribed rest until the wedding day. During her supposed recovery, Martha was kept under constant watch in the room she had once shared with Sarah. Through the narrow window, she watched the wedding preparations, the chapel decorated with pine boughs, the new cabin being built for her and Jeremiah, the relatives arriving from neighboring properties. Her once expressive and lively face became an impassive mask. "The girl has lost her soul," commented one aunt. "It is the price of purity," replied another. On the night of November 11, 1836, Martha executed the plan she had been silently crafting since Sarah's death. Using knowledge acquired over years of observation and secret study, she mingled a combination of sleep-inducing herbs into the celebration wine. While the Sullivans drank and celebrated the union set for the next day, Martha stayed sober, watching as the guests grew heavy-lidded and their movements slowed. When the last one, including her designated guards, fell into a deep slumber, she set each element of her meticulous plan into motion. First, she retrieved from a hiding place under a loose floorboard a small bag of gold coins collected over years of secretly selling medicinal herbs to outsiders. She then put on a set of prepared men's clothes, shearing off her long hair with the knife she kept sharp beneath her mattress. She gathered a group of 5 children, all born with deformities from consanguineous unions, who were kept hidden in various corners of the property. With silent, precise movements, she led the children from the main house to the stable, where 2 horses were already saddled. The chosen date was no accident. She had purposely waited for the new moon, ensuring maximum darkness for their escape. The countdown she had kept in her mind for months had finally reached 0. "Today we are born again," she whispered to the frightened children as she helped them onto the horses. Back on the Sullivan property, wedding preparations were at their peak. Oil lanterns illuminated the path from the main house to the chapel, where a already drunk Reverend Blackwood rehearsed the ceremony. In the bride's quarters, 3 Sullivan aunts arranged the white dress on the empty bed, arguing over who would have the honor of placing the traditional family veil. In the kitchen, a whole pig roasted slowly over the fire, while women prepared bread and sweets for the feast that would traditionally last 2 days. Meanwhile, miles away, Martha Sullivan executed each phase of her plan with clockwork precision. In the shadows of the dense forest, she applied dark dyes, prepared days before from walnuts and charcoal, to the children's faces and her own for camouflage. 2 of the smallest children, unable to ride alone due to limb deformities, were secured to her body with leather straps. The eldest of the 5, a 12-year-old boy who had never developed speech but understood instructions, held the reins of the second horse, where the other 2 children balanced. The distant sound of music and laughter was gradually replaced by the thud of hooves on soft forest soil and the occasional hoot of an owl. As the first light of dawn began to tinge the horizon, the small group reached the first stage of the plan, a hunter's abandoned cabin, 15 miles from the Sullivan property, where Martha had secretly stockpiled supplies for months. The prearranged signal, 3 short whistles, confirmed they had reached the first safe point. In the early hours of November 12, 1836, Martha executed her plan in meticulously timed stages. First phase: infiltration of the patriarch's quarters where family documents were kept. With silent movements learned from observing hunters, she recovered birth certificates and the family record book documenting generations of consanguineous marriages. Second phase: strategic isolation. Cutting the alarm bell ropes and removing the wheels from carts to hinder pursuit. Third phase: liberation of the hidden children. 5 small ones kept in various secret compartments across the property due to their visible deformities. For each adult who had participated directly in the cruelties, Martha left a specific mark. For the uncle who had flogged Sarah, a strand of her sister's golden hair upon his pillow. For cousin Herbert, who was to have married Sarah, a child's drawing the girl had made weeks before her death. Finding Jeremiah in deep sleep, she leaned close and whispered in his ear, "The Sullivan blood ends here." In Patriarch Ebenezer's room, she left the record book open to the page documenting the birth and premature death of 23 children in the past 15 years, all with congenital deformities, with a single sentence written in the margin, "It was not God who created these monsters." By the time fire began to consume the barn where Sarah had been punished to death, Martha was already guiding the 5 children down a forest trail, leaving behind only silence. The exodus led by Martha followed a precise script. First, a stop at the hunter's cabin to exchange the horses, marked with the Sullivan symbol, for less identifiable mules. Then, they split into 2 groups for lower visibility, following secondary trails and avoiding main roads where news of their escape would surely spread. Martha had prearranged a meeting with Rebecca Thornton, a midwife and herbalist who lived on society's fringes and sympathized with her cause after treating Sullivan children with the results of consanguineous marriages. In Rebecca's simple home, Martha organized a makeshift ritual. She cut a lock of hair from each child, burned them along with the wedding dress she had secretly taken, mixed the ashes with soil, and planted a young oak tree in the enriched earth. "This tree marks the end of one cycle and the beginning of another," she explained to the wide-eyed children. The plan included calculated resistance. Martha knew some children, conditioned by the oppressive environment, would fear the unknown outside world. For the 6-year-old girl who refused to leave the hiding spot at Rebecca's, she softly sang old lullabies until the child fell asleep in her arms. For the older boy who tried to run back to the Sullivan property security, she offered not orders, but a choice, the first true choice any Sullivan had ever been given. When they finally departed, they formed a small column, Martha at the lead, each child carrying only one significant personal object, and Rebecca at the rear. In the distance, smoke was still visible, a grey column against the November blue sky, marking the place where generations of Sullivans had perpetuated their cycle of isolation and genetic decay. News of the events on the Sullivan property spread like wildfire. The Harlan County Sheriff, initially reluctant to investigate the isolated family's internal affairs, was forced to act when flames consumed a significant portion of the property. His official report, preserved in county archives, describes with bureaucratic language what he found: structures damaged by fire, seemingly deliberate, several individuals in a comatose state from ingesting an unknown substance, disappearance of 1 adult female, MS, and 5 minors. Correspondence between local and state authorities reveals growing alarm. The Sullivan case represents a potential threat to the social and moral order. Maximum discretion is recommended. By December 1836, records indicate 3 other isolated properties in the Appalachian Mountains, all with histories of close relative marriages, suffered similar fates. Children with deformities vanished. Compromising family documents were mysteriously exposed to the community. In February 1837, the Kentucky governor received a confidential report mentioning the emergence of a Sullivan method, a term describing the systematic liberation of children from consanguineous unions and the exposure of family records. The press of the time, limited by social conventions, only indirectly referred to the events, mentioning disturbances in isolated communities and a renewed interest by authorities in marital practices in the mountainous regions. Among families who kept similar traditions, however, panic was palpable. Private documents reveal frantic correspondence: "We must disperse the children at once." In contrast, Hopeful whispers circulated among marginalized communities and abolitionist groups about the woman who frees the forgotten. The state's response to Martha's escape and the subsequent liberation wave was swift and severe. In March 1837, Governor James Clark secretly authorized a special force of 6 experienced rangers, led by Captain William Harrington, a veteran of the Indian Wars known for his relentless efficiency. Using tracking techniques honed during years of pursuing fugitive slaves, they followed the group's trail through 5 counties. A progressive siege strategy gradually shrunk the territory available for hiding, while agents infiltrating marginalized communities offered rewards for information. The first capture came in April 1837, 2 children found in a Shaker community that had taken them in without questions. By June, the siege tightened when a traveling merchant, tempted by a substantial reward, revealed he had ferried a young woman with short hair and 3 deformed children across the Ohio River. The final betrayal came from an unexpected source. Reverend Michaels, who had initially offered the group sanctuary in his small rural church, gave up their location after authorities threatened to investigate his own questionable finances. The decisive confrontation occurred on August 17, 1837, in an isolated cabin near Cincinnati. Unofficial reports describe how Martha, realizing they were surrounded, organized the escape of the remaining 3 children through a pre-prepared tunnel while she stayed behind to delay their pursuers. Witnesses stated that when the rangers broke down the door, they found her sitting calmly at a table with the Sullivan documents spread before her and a small, empty poison bottle in her hand. Her last words, recorded by Captain Harrington in his personal diary, were, "Sullivan blood now runs free in the world. You will never find them all." In the decades following Martha Sullivan's death, her story evolved from a family scandal into a regional legend. In isolated Appalachian communities, a body of oral traditions grew around her figure. Hunters swore they saw a woman with short hair guiding children through the forest on moonless nights. Midwives discreetly offered protection to newborns with deformities, citing the Martha Way as justification. Families that maintained consanguineous marriage practices reported nighttime visits from a female presence who left small cloth dolls, similar to the one Martha had placed in Sarah's coffin, as a silent warning. Objects associated with her story took on a near-mythical status. The Sullivan family record book, reportedly burned, passed through several hands before being anonymously donated to the Kentucky Historical Society in 1867, where it remains an important document on the period's marital practices. In isolated rural communities, folk songs preserved her memory through coded verses. The midnight lady takes the marked small when the moon hides and the watchmen sleep. From 1870 onward, a significant decline in close relative marriages occurred in the mountain regions, a phenomenon academic historians attribute to growing social and economic integration, while local tradition credits the Sullivan effect. Discreet pilgrimages to Martha's alleged burial site, an unmarked mound near the Ohio-Kentucky border, became an annual tradition among families with histories of congenital deficiencies. In stark contrast to official records that minimized her existence, popular memory turned Martha Sullivan into an enduring symbol of resistance against practices that sacrificed innocent lives on the altar of distorted tradition. In certain isolated Appalachian communities, even today, when a child is born with extra fingers or other signs of consanguinity, the elders whisper, "This child has Martha's touch." If you have watched this far, it is because you care about the stories that have forever marked our nation. Leave a comment saying, "I was here," so I can get to know you and see who truly cares about the search for historical truth.